The water in Iqaluit gotta be fixed right away.
Tonight, don't drink the water. The city of Iqaluit issues a public safety warning after strange odors waft out of the water treatment plant.
They're just so weak that they don't even make it back to our communities. They're dead when we bring them back.
Mi'kmaq fishers accuse the Department of Fisheries and Oceans of punching holes in the tails of wild lobsters.
Because if you see police force or going to share that responsibility.
And a First Nation in Quebec comes up with a new way to help police themselves. Good evening, I'm Melissa Ridgen with your APTN National News. Iqaluit residents have feared for their water supply for years due to a failing infrastructure and rapidly growing community. But now, a worst-case scenario, the city has a serious water problem, and you can't boil this one away. Here's Kent Driscoll in Iqaluit.
That dam you see behind me, that's Lake Geraldine. That's Iqaluit's main water source. Somewhere in between that lake and the 7,000 residents who live just down there over the hill, there's a problem with the water. Petroleum hydrocarbons. And it means we have no drinking water in Iqaluit.
Iqaluit's mayor announced on social media at 3:30 yesterday, don't drink the water, and followed up after an emergency city council meeting. Iqaluit gets pretty frequent boil water orders, usually from when pipes are being repaired and sediment can be dislodged. This is worse. You can't boil it away. You can't filter it out. It's bad enough that pregnant women and infants are being instructed not to bathe. Almost every baby born on Baffin Island is born here in Iqaluit, the regional medical hub. A water problem that hurts pregnant women and infants gets multiplied here. A local state of emergency has been declared, schools and offices are closed, the territorial government says they're flying in 80,000 liters of bottled water, and that the testing results for the water supply will take at least 5 business days, Monday at the earliest. So this is how Iqaluit residents are getting water. A city truck fills up here at the Sylvia Grinnell River, alongside other residents. And this is a popular spot to get fresh water, even when the pipes are providing potable water. They truck it into Iqaluit, where it's doled out by the jug. This isn't a perfect fix. This water still needs to be boiled before drinking. One day in, and residents are managing. So far.
The water in Iqaluit gotta be fixed right away. Yeah.
As bad as this is, it could get a lot worse in very short order. Iqaluit usually has permanent snow on the ground before Halloween. Imagine what this scene looks like when the snow hits. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
On October 30th, proof of vaccination will be required to travel by air or rail, but Indigenous people living in remote fly-in communities will most likely be exempt. The federal government says it's working on an exemption to its newly released vaccine policy. It would apply to people living in remote Indigenous communities, many of which are only accessible by air. The exemption would ensure that unvaccinated people living in these communities can obtain essential health services. Nunavik, the vast Inuit territory in northern Quebec, is facing a COVID-19 outbreak. While the numbers at first glance may not seem too alarming, other factors suggest that there's cause for concern. Tom Fenario joins us from Montreal with the details. Tom, thanks for joining us. So what's going on in Nunavik?
Well, okay, so to give you an idea, for those of you who don't know Quebec geography that well, right at the very tippest point of Quebec is a little city called Iqaluit. I shouldn't even call it a city. It's only about 400 people. This is the furthest village in Quebec. It's actually 1,900 kilometers north of Montreal. To give you an idea of how far north it is, it's actually only 500 kilometers from Iqaluit if you go across the Hudson Strait. This community only has 400 people in it, and amongst those 400 people, there are 7 active cases there of COVID-19. Other people are also under observation. As a result, curfew is now in place between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Perhaps also more concerning is there is another case a few hundred kilometers south in Inukjuak, another community in Nunavik. There are 14 communities in Nunavik, linked to an airport. That's all we have on those details. There are other people also under observation there. So considering that Nunavik does not have a very large population, these numbers are a little concerning.
Yeah, well, and so explain to us how even a small case count affects these tiny villages in this region.
Well, unfortunately, the vaccination rates are quite low in Nunavik. As of mid-September, the whole region itself has double vaccinated 52% of the population. To give you an idea, the province of Quebec is upwards of 80%. Iqaluit, the small community that I mentioned of 400 people at the tippest point of Quebec, is at 55%, which they consider to be mild immunization. But in Nukshawak, the other place that has only one case so far, has 38% double vaccinated. So that's extremely poor in terms of immunization, and that is very problematic. As someone who covered the Quebec inquiry into public services and Indigenous people for a few years, that inquiry went into healthcare. This is before the Joyce Echaquan incident even, and I heard some pretty awful testimony regarding healthcare services sometimes for Inuit people in northern Quebec. So I think it's safe to say there's quite a bit of hesitancy with regards to vaccines and trust in the healthcare system up there.
Right. Well, and with low vaccination rates, and once you've got confirmed cases up there, I mean, this sounds like it could potentially overwhelm the healthcare system if things get out of hand.
For sure. A little community such as Iqaluit doesn't even have its own hospital. It has maybe a clinic. Even then, I'm not sure. I'd have to confirm that. But so they would have to fly patients to another community or to Montreal to get serious treatment should the worst happen in terms of symptoms. Now, Nunavik has had an outbreak before, earlier in the first wave or second wave, earlier in 2020, I should say, and not much came of it. However, those were more mild variants. It is still unclear what kind of variant is affecting the Nunavik region right now.
So is maybe coming out of all of this, is there more people, do you think, encouraged to go and get vaccinated now with these new cases?
That's a question that we put to the Nunavik Regional Board of Health and Social Services. I think I got that right. And we've yet to hear back from them. Just judging from their social media, they certainly are encouraging folks to get vaccinated. I know they're working on getting youth vaccinated at this point. I believe their numbers are higher for folks over 40 and 50, and they are a very young population, the Inuit of Nunavik. So perhaps those numbers might see a bit of a bump. I don't see a ton of encouragement on other social media, though, with regards to, say, like the Nunavik Regional Government, the folks who oversee it. I don't see much vaccination promotion on there, so maybe that'll change going forward.
Yeah.
Well,
Tom, thanks for this update. Always good to see you and hear from you, and something we'll definitely have to keep an eye on here for APTN National News.
We'll have more tomorrow. Thanks, Melissa.
The United States is reopening its land border to fully vaccinated Canadians in early November. It's been closed for 19 months because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It means fully vaccinated Canadians will be able to cross at land and ferry crossings, but it's unclear whether people with mixed doses or people who received AstraZeneca will be able to visit. More than 3.9 million Canadians have 2 different doses of Health Canada approved COVID-19 vaccines. Approximately 1.6 million had a dose of the AstraZeneca. Canada's Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister is in Washington today saying that Canada's almost gotten past the 4th wave of COVID-19. When asked about the safety of the U.S. border reopening, she quoted advice of Toronto's top doctor, Eileen de Villa, in her response.
She said, you know, just try to do the things you need to do and maybe hold back on doing the things that you just want to do. And I think if we can keep on doing that for a few more weeks, Canada can really fully put COVID behind us. And I have to say, as a finance minister, and I bet Olaf will agree with me, the single most important economic policy for Canada right now is to put the 4th wave behind us and to be in a position where we can keep our economy fully open.
It's unclear whether people with mixed doses or people who received AstraZeneca will be able to visit. More than 3.9 million Canadians have had 2 different doses of Health Canada approved COVID-19 vaccines, not including Quebec, which does not categorize data by vaccine product. Of those, approximately 1.6 million had a dose of the AstraZeneca formula, followed by an mRNA vaccine. As of now, the U.S. has not approved the AstraZeneca vaccine. To southwestern Nova Scotia, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is punching holes in lobster tails to track them. But Mi'kmaq fishers say the government's pilot project is killing the lobsters, making them unsafe for consumption. Angel Moore explains.
I'm here at Saulnieville Wharf, where Sipekne'katik First Nation fishers are harvesting lobster. Under their ban's food, social, and ceremonial fishery, also known as the FSC fishery, it's to feed their community. But some lobsters have holes punched in the flippers, a new pilot project by the DFO to track the lobster to make sure they are not illegally sold. Justin Johnson of Sipekne'katik says that's risking the health of community members.
Some of the lobsters that they're punching out there, they're just so weak that they don't even make it back to our communities. They're dead when we bring them back.
Lobster release toxins when they die and are not safe for human consumption. APTN News asked the Department of Fisheries for a response. In an email statement to APTN News, DFO said it is not aware of any evidence indicating the physical marking of lobster tails jeopardized the health of the lobster. If the lobster with the marking were to be found in the possession of a person or entity during a subsequent inspection without legal justification or for the purpose of sale, officers could investigate. Earlier today, 4 DFO officers were on the Mi'kmaq Wharf and spoke with a fisher. That person did not want to speak on camera, but he said the officers asked if the lobster had FSC tags. Johnson says that is harassment.
I feel that it's crazy and unnecessary, really, because we're all fishing FSC here, and what they keep doing is coming and like harassing us, basically. They're harassing us out on the water and on the land, both.
Sipekne'katik fishers are preparing to launch their commercial fishery tomorrow out of the Digby Wharf. Meanwhile, FSC fishery continues. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Saulnieville Wharf.
Thanks, Angel. Well, we need to take a break, but still ahead, a man charged with driving a truck through a homeless camp in Thunder Bay. Stay with us. Welcome back. An Ontario man has been charged with dangerous driving after plowing his pickup truck through a homeless camp in Thunder Bay. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but Michelle Karlenzig has more on the story and houseless people in Thunder Bay. Michelle?
Thanks, Melissa. Last Tuesday, a man drove his pickup truck over a tent at a houseless people's camp in Thunder Bay. Police later confirmed that nobody was in the tent. While police are still investigating the motive, local advocates say that this is nothing new in a city with a history of racism. Lisa Davey is an outreach worker, and she says the roughly 20 people living in the camp were traumatized.
They thought that there was somebody in the tent, and luckily he had, it was just a matter of minutes where he had left his tent to go to Walmart to use the bathroom. So yeah, initially, like, all of us were feeling just angry about the incident, and and then worrying about the safety and then the mental health of the people that were on site.
Last month, the city planned to build a fence around the area, which meant that the people living there would have to relocate. I spoke with an elder who works with vulnerable people in Thunder Bay. She opposed the fence and even protested against it.
They're willing to spend money to close the gate around it so no homeless people goes in there. They'd rather spend that money to do that than spend money for the homeless people to find shelters for them.
The city backed down and will not follow through with the fence. Mayor Bill Moreau said that he cannot specifically comment on the incident because it's under investigation, but he did say that he reached out to the province of Ontario for additional funding and support for houseless people. Now, nearly 2/3 of Thunder Bay's houseless population is Indigenous. That's about 500 people, according to a 2018 survey. The federal government also came out this year saying that Thunder Bay is a racism hotspot. We'll be following this story as it develops. Back to you, Melissa.
Thanks for that, Michelle. The Anishinaabe community of Longpoint says the wheels are finally in motion. This after months of pushing the Quebec government for their own Indigenous-led police force. Now, thanks to a newly minted agreement with the province, they'll be creating a rapid response team to work with provincial police, a first step on the way to getting their own police force. Tensions between Longpoint and Quebec's provincial police force, the Sûreté de Québec, have persisted for years. Demands for a community police force ramped up recently because the SQ was slow to respond to crisis incidents within the community. For phase 1 of the policing project, 2 Indigenous liaisons will be appointed to work for with the SQ. The long-term goal is to create an intertribal, tri-community police service to service Anishinaabe territory. But the chief of Longpoint says that there's still lots left to do.
Who's going to coordinate and supervise all of the operations in on? Is it, are we appointing an individual to assume that role and responsibility? Or is it going to be one of the police force that's going to play that role? These are the things that we need to determine there now, and with the schedule, because if there's 3 police force are going to share that responsibility, but we need to know which police force is going to assume this week, next week, and on the weekend.
Just south of La Ronge, Saskatchewan, residents are opposing Quebec's Lambert peat moss harvest next year. The group, for peat's sake, is trying to save the muskeg from being destroyed. The top layer is removed through harvesting and then dried to be used in potting soil. The group says this method of harvesting is not only destructive to the sensitive ecosystem, but it removes that natural fire break that peat bogs provide, and it can take decades for the moss to return to its natural state. Well, we will have more on that on a future APTN in Focus. We have to take one more quick break, and when we come back, we'll take a look at the colonial playbook that Canada has used throughout its history with First Nations people and a toolkit to dismantle it. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Anissa Terry sent us this incredible shot of the Northern Lights near Iqaluit, British Columbia. So many incredible Northern Lights photos circulating on social media today from across the country. You can email us your pics to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting off on the East Coast, we've got cloud, a chance of showers at St. John's, 8 degrees there, 19 in cloud for Halifax, 17 with a mix of sun and clouds in the Grand River, Kuujjuaq, sunshine and 6. Sept-Îles, 16 with a mix of sun and clouds, in Montreal as well, but 22 degrees there. 18 expected for North Bay and showers expected too. So look out, showers and 12 degrees, showers and 15 in Thunder Bay. Showers up in northern Manitoba 2, Churchill 5, Pukatuagan 3. And it continues in southern Manitoba, 9 for Barons River and Princess Harbour, 10 for Gimli and Winnipeg. Chance of snow in Swift Current, 6 degrees, same in Saskatoon. Sunshine though for northern Saskatchewan, 7 in Uranium City, 6 in Buffalo Narrows. Lots of sun for northern Alberta, 10 in High Level and Fort McMurray and Grand Prairie. 11 in Edmonton, 10 with some showers expected for Lethbridge. Sunny and 13 for Kamloops, 10 and rain for Bella Coola. 9 in sunshine for Fort Nelson. Dease Lake looks like a chance of showers and 5 degrees. 0 and flurries expected for Dawson City, 4 and some flurries expected for Mayo. Wauhee, sunshine and 6 degrees. 9 for Fort Simpson, Fort Liard and Trout Lake. Nunavik -1 with a mix of sun and cloud. Paulachuck 2 and sunny. Cambridge Bay, 2 in sunshine, Nuyat, 0 and sunny. Kenite, 0 in sunshine, same with Iqaluit and Pangertung. Colonialism and the colonial playbook used throughout this country's history to oppress Indigenous people was the topic of the day on In Focus. We dissected the first episode of the new APTN Investigates season, which kicked off last Friday. Producer Robert Ballantyne and Russ Diabo joins me. Some are calling for Canada to be investigated by a foreign agency for its behavior, past and present, towards Indigenous people.
Well, yeah, I think, you're bringing up the idea of the mistake, right? And we see that in the history, labeling something as a mistake legally is really different, right? Manslaughter is like, I made a mistake, whereas like second or first degree is that you had a plan.
Right.
Right? And so you hear that language being used, and how is Canada going to investigate itself? You know, in part 3 of the segment, we look at Cindy Blackstock that addresses that, and we'll talk a bit about that later. But this idea of how do you uphold your own self to punishment? And so Keisha Supernaut brought that idea up that Canada can't investigate itself here. It needs somebody independent to look at this and figure out what to do with it.
Well, I'm super glad that you could join us, Russ. It's always great to chat with you. You know, this has kind of been your life's work, this counter-terrorism and analyzing and dissecting Canada's next moves. You know, it really is kind of like counter-terrorism, what you do in a large respect. So I'm curious what your thoughts of when you'd watch this Colonial Playbook.
Well, you know, I was glad to see it come on as a program to start an introduction into the issue. But there are bigger issues that, you know, the residential school, you know, mass burial sites and, you know, the court actions against, you know, child welfare and Jordan's principle, and that are part of a larger context of the colonial system and structure that's still in place. You know, I listened to the Prime Minister's first press conference on September 28th that he did after the federal election, and he referred to Canada's harms and mistakes when he was talking about his reconciliation agenda. So he's using that term. It must be one of the talking points of the Trudeau government.
Yeah. Speaking of investigations, the Canadian government had no problem investigating prominent Indigenous advocates. Here's a clip from the Colonial Playbook when government representatives were asked about spying on children's advocate Cindy Blackstock.
Her main message was predictable. First Nations children are underfunded by the government. Well, that's predictable because it's true. There are numerous employees on government payroll who are being asked to comment on what I'm doing, or to violate my privacy by going onto my personal Facebook pages.
Strelkova describes why she monitored Blackstock's personal Facebook page.
But why didn't you just ask Cindy Blackstock, can I have access to your page?
She's on a different team.
You can watch that entire episode at aptnnews.ca/investigates. And be sure to catch part 2, the Colonial Toolkit, right here after the news this Friday on APTN Investigates. Well, the statue of Christopher Columbus, which until this week stood in central Mexico City, has been replaced by, quote, the young woman of Amajac. The statue is a replica of a figure that was unearthed by farmers near Mexico's Gulf Coast. Anthropologists estimate the original 6-foot statue was made sometime between 1450 and 1521. There is speculation that it depicts a leading female member of the Huastec people. The young woman will stand 3 times the height of Columbus. The statue of Columbus in Mexico City was taken down last year after local Indigenous rights activists threatened to tear it down. Well, that is your APTN National News for the midweek. Thanks to you for joining us. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.